strange, but looking at you from here, I feel like I should sort of stand up and be cabin crew and say, or we're on a bus tour or something. Anyway, we'll press on.
We'll have a good destination.
We'll have a great destination. Yeah. So yeah, as Sarah was saying, I did have an instant connection. I was here looking at other paintings, and the previous exhibition had just been cleared away, and there was one painting on the floor, and I walked past it and just went like that, and that was it.
I agree. And when I read your books, I was really astonished at the number of metaphors that you've used that either rang a bell or were literally the same as some of the ones I was using or have been using over many years. Really, so it's a long process.
It is odd. It is even down to there's a big wallpaper theme in one of my books, and there's a big wallpaper theme in your
in fact, the
work,
one that you then fell for has themes of wallpaper, which were to do with my childhood when my sister's bedroom was wallpapered, and I thought, being creative in mind, I would help with this process, and proceeded to draw over this beautiful new wallpaper, much to my sister's and my parents' horror, as you can imagine.
Yes, there's something about your people and your faces that are so expressive, and so they are telling stories. I think that is the nugget of why your work blows me away, because you're just telling stories. Each of these paintings, as you look around, there's just stories going on. So shall we unpick one?
We can try. I'm very much aware that other people will come to them with their own background stories, and I think that's so with any artwork. Perhaps. So maybe that I shouldn't be surprised by that, but I'm very glad for that as well, because I don't feel like it's a static thing. So everything I say is, well, it might be this or it might be that, or this is what I was thinking, this is where the impulse came from.
Actually, I was listening to a podcast of Kazuo Ishiguro talking about exactly this, that how he feels he knows exactly what his work is about for him, and people constantly misinterpret his work and think it's about something else for them, and he has to fight against that feeling when they come to him and say, I love this about your work, and he thinks, but that's not what that was about.
What is that? But it's quite interesting. It can actually make you re-see your work when somebody does that, and it does happen for sure.
Let's start with in Marvellous Suspension, because that's what
which is one of the pieces in the window you probably saw as you came in.
So I think that's probably the best place to start.
That's a good place to start, because that's where the title of the show came from. In Marvellous Suspension of Disbelief came because I was painting a creature that was holding somebody aloft, and this person was resting on this creature. And you'll see that it's not a real thing. It's a kind of hummingbird, stick creature. It might be real. It might be somebody dressed up, as in the circus, to become a creature. So there's lots of might be's going on there. And so she is hovering above something that may not be there. It may be there, it may not be there. It's maybe real, it may not be real. She's kind of resting on it, lying back, really trusting that it's not going to drop her. And that is the feeling I often get when I'm making work. Because the creation of anything new, as anyone who is a perpetual or habitual creator of something brand new, is quite frightening sometimes. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that. You are trusting in the unknown. Whatever you're making, if it's authentic, you're literally trying to grasp something that's never happened before, never been in existence. And so that painting is all about that experience. But also it's about the need, when you see a work of art, whether it be a painting or a piece of music or a performance in the circus, the need for you to suspend your disbelief, because you have to stop thinking about the way that the world really is, your normal premise for how things are, and go with the premise that the artist has set up. Because in reality, you're just looking at a surface with marks on. That is it. And yet, you're looking at so much more.
Yeah. And some of the paintings seem to be about exactly that kind of duality of it's this imaginative world, it's this suspension, it's this marvellous thing,
Yes.
but it's also you're drawing attention to the marks on the page, I say page, on the canvas. There are, I can't remember which one. These ones where you have the
drips.
sort of drips of paint.
That was something I was trying to achieve when I was in Mexico. I really wanted to allow the making of the work to come through more, so that there was kind of more reality to the actual substance or the surface of the work. And so in some of them, it's not in this one, but in the one in the window, in some of them there are patches of collage. This one's collage. There are lots of drips, there are lots of blobs, and I quite like that sort of the stuffness of it and the kind of physicality of that.
I was particularly with Velvet Elephant. I was particularly drawn to this collage. There's a fabric on his spine. Do you want to talk a bit about him and what he means or her?
The elephant in my mind just kind of grew as a kind of large, dark object that I wanted to attach ideas or feelings or nerve endings to almost. And it became an elephant very quickly, and I allowed it to do that. Sometimes the painting kind of forms itself and you don't have complete control, and that's when it sort of works best in a way. There's a sort of conversation that goes on, and these sort of performers hanging off this massive creature, the massiveness of it and the delicacy of the performance rather. And you might wonder about these sort of blobs that occur in a lot of the work, which I'm not really sure what they are. I think they are nerve endings, I think they're body cells, because I'm very interested in the body and in depicting the body, obviously, but almost all figures. I'm very interested in that and in depicting us as people and our experience of living, but the experience of the body not just as the external body, but of the internal organs and the workings and how that affects us psychologically, and how psychologically we affect the body. And so I've kind of almost like drawn out the cells or the nerve endings and brought them out onto the surface, because I kind of feel that's how we live. We live with these kind of nerve endings, what's going on, what's happening all the time.
So that feeling, that's a theme in a lot of your work, is the internal organs that are visible. And I wondered if that for you was a sense of the mortality, like what's going on for you with that bringing out the internal organs particularly?
I think although it's a physical thing, I think it's the psychology that fascinates me about it. It's our relationship with our bodies, and that interrelated psychology and physicality, and how we express it, either knowingly or not knowingly. So the bitten nails, the spotty skin, all of these things are telltale signs of somebody's psychology, really.
Right.
In fact, I think psychologists say that most illness is psychological. Not to say that it's made up, but it is our mental state that sometimes creates forces on the body that sometimes can end in illness. And I find that fascinating, that sort of dual existence of the mind-body, and that sort of interplay, and I love to explore that, really. That's what's going on.
You explore it in so many different ways over and over again, looking at it from different angles.
Yes.
And that's interesting to me, because I think that's also what a lot of writers do.
I think so.
That writers tend to sort of basically write the same book again and again and again, but looking at it from different angles. And
Yes.
I suppose you can't ever escape from your own psyche.
No.
So that's what, and that seems to be what happens with your work as well. It's like you're looking at the same. You've got preconception
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but you
There are bit core themes.
you've got
sure.
core themes, things that bother you,
Yes.
that trouble you, those nerve endings.
Yes.
That you're
And
going to keep
things
looking
loop
at.
back.
Yeah.
So you might be starting on a new subject, but always it loops back and pulls something from further longer ago and pulls it forward into a new image. But I think that's a good thing. I think that is where you start to really plumb the depths.
Yes.
And find something that's genuinely interesting.
And you start to evolve. And I think what you were talking about at the beginning of our conversation about the fear that you have when you're making a piece of art or writing a book, and that fear that just sits with you the whole time, that is this all going to collapse?
Yes.
Is it nothing?
Yes.
And
Is it nothing? Yes.
I can have that until right at the end of a book where it starts to all come together, and I will have spent 2 or 3 years thinking, this is about to collapse. It's nothing.
It's
I
fun
know,
enough
I mean,
doing
that's
it
the
over the
difference,
course of months.
But I think in a way it's comparable. The different artworks become a body of work for you, in a way that the different scenes or the different chapters become a novel.
Yes.
I think there's
a similarity and a similar gestation period, you might say.
Yeah. And the circus, do you want to talk a bit about the circus theme that runs
Yes.
through it, this idea of performance
It kind of took over from when I was in Mexico. I was in Mexico and painting, because I was there for 6 weeks, which sounds like a long time, but in painting life it's not. But I was working really fast, and I became interested in the kind of performative aspect of life, particularly in Mexico at that time, because it was Day of the Dead. I was really lucky. My residency coincided with that, which suited my work brilliantly. And I was very interested to see people dressed up in the streets, very comfortable with moving around dressed as a devil or a bride, or there was a little girl who was dressed as a bride, and or wearing huge dresses or face painted, all very comfortable with that. This sort of performative aspect of what you display in life and what you hold back. That's a theme I've long held in my work anyway. And this sort of morphed into performance, and the performance morphed into the circus, because I love the circus for its kind of faded glitz and glamour, and the grime as well, which I think is equally fascinating. The grime, the danger, and that all sort of seemed to feed back into the ideas that I've been working with anyway.
Questions?
I'm really interested in the body language of all the figures in your work, because they have this wonderful balance between being very poised yet candid. So is that a lot to do with the psychology that you're talking about? It's sort of the body language and how they're conveying themselves.
I would say so. So I'm giving hints as to the person's feelings, I guess, with the body language, which we all do, and I find that just endlessly fascinating. There's so much that can be done with that. I think that's what it's about. Again, it goes back to the psychology, the emotions, the thoughts, and some of them obviously are distorted, because that's how we experience our feelings, I guess. Yes. Anybody else have a question? Hi.
You said quite early on that sometimes people come back to you and tell you that they've seen something in the painting that you hadn't necessarily meant. Does that kind of irritate you? Would you rather they kind of got the point, or?
Generally speaking, no. But there is one thing that I'm aware that I did, that I felt. So sometimes people say to me, "Oh, your painting's quite surrealist, isn't it?" And to me, I go, "No, this is my real life. What are we doing? This is what it is." And when I was in Mexico, it wasn't a taught residency at all, but there was some visiting artists and curators who came and they spoke to us. And all of them went, "Oh, your work's really surrealist." And I was like, "No, it's not." But they then went on to explain that in Mexico, the surrealists were very revered, so that was nice. So that kind of soothed my feathers a little bit. But it's more to do with psychology, and so that did drop into place for me. However, when the lay people say something to me about the work and it's not in line with what I was thinking, I usually find that interesting, actually. It's interesting, and sometimes it brings up another side of the work that I hadn't even thought about. Because I think, you make a work and you present it to the world, and off it goes like a child. It's no longer in your control. And how people receive it, it's not up to me how people perceive my work, really. My only job is to put it out there, which isn't, as easy as that sound might make it sound. It's not just stick it out there. It's harder than that. But yeah, that's my job. How people receive it is theirs. Yeah. Yes.
Particularly how lay people receive it. I'm looking at some of this, and when I stand in front of them, it feels almost like I'm reliving a dream. Very dream-like images for me.
Yes.
I'm wondering if that's something you consciously do. And also, they're sort of being passive, but there's all this symbolism with dogs and strange positions, extra limbs, and all this kind of stuff that seems evocative of archetypal images. I'm wondering if that's something you try and evoke as well. Is that just where it comes from in you? Maybe?
I think with this collection I have specifically looked at archetypal characters and images, which is new actually for me. I don't think that's something I particularly have done in the past, very much anyway. Sorry, I've kind of lost the thread of the question.
There's a great deal of information.
Yes, so there's a lot of information. There are, yes, it's dreamlike in the sense that it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense in the real world, I guess. It's dreamlike in that way.
It kind of made me feel like almost I was looking at an image I might have recalled from a dream that I'd awoken from.
That's marvellous. I love that you said that.
I feel that too. I really get that feeling that you're connecting with something bigger than yourself. That's where the sort of archetypal feeling of these figures comes in. There's that sense of you're connecting with something
feel
human.
that too.
Yeah.
Now this is going to sound weird. I also feel that. Because that makes me sound like my art is separate to me, but it kind of is, in a way. I'm just a sort of, oh my god, this is going to sound crass, facilitator of my own work. Yeah. So I just make what kind of comes forth. And when it works, it's like, oh, I've seen that before. That's always been here. That, I think, is when it really has worked well, is that feeling of almost familiarity, even though I'm pretty sure it's not a copy of anything. Obviously there are influences that come in constantly. You're constantly absorbing the influences, and I'm trying to push them out, but in a different format. Yes.
I suppose that's when it starts to feel true. It's a bit like when you're writing and you're trying to create a character, and then suddenly the character takes over and becomes real. It feels like you've created somebody real.
And you're writing about somebody you've met, or your friend or something.
Somehow they've become a person, which is, I think, what's happening with you. That somehow it feels like it's always been there.
Yes.
And you don't really know where it came from.
And later, certainly after a year or so, you look back at a painting and think, gosh, where did that come from? You do feel that.
And do you feel a sense of like you might be setting out to create one thing and something else entirely appears?
Yes. It's like trying to grasp water, really.
Yeah. And something that was always there is going to just gradually make itself known. And it's
there's no
partly
avoiding it.
Yeah.
It's like trying to avoid yourself. You can't.
Yeah.
You're always there.
But that's when you know you're onto something, isn't it? When you get that feeling that they're appearing despite
Yes.
you, not because of you.
Yes, I think so. And that really shows in your work. And whilst we're talking about that, you really have got to read Lucy's books. They are
We're here for you.
amazing.
We're here for you. Has anyone else got any questions? I don't know if we should maybe
Can we do?
wrap up.
Yeah.
those.
Yes, and let people actually see the work.
Yeah.
Can
Thank you so much for coming. And
Thank you, everybody.
thank
And
you, Sarah.